All right, everybody, I'm gonna go into the 4 things you should know before getting into purchasing commercial investment real estate. But before I do that, I wanna go into why you might wanna consider doing that. Number 1, and the most important to me in my growth of a real estate investor and developer, is scalability of wealth. You can do one deal that can change your life if it's large enough and has enough meat on the bone. With residential being 1 through 4 family, you really have to do many of those to actually have lifestyle changes. So for instance, I did one deal, my first $1 million deal, that paid for my daughter's college education. My second larger deal paid for my wife's retirement should she decide to retire early. So really understanding the why behind doing it, all right? Now, what is considered commercial investment real estate? Commercial investment real estate is not 1 through 4 family. It is 5 family and up, or a building or property that has some type of commercial use or aspect to it. So a commercial property could be 1 storefront and 2 apartments up top. That could be considered a commercial property. Or it could be a single standalone, single tenant property. Or it could be a 5-unit or larger apartment community. So that's the definition of commercial real estate, what I mean in this video. Now, number 1, which is the most important, but not the most sexy, is environmental. Whenever you're purchasing a property that's 5 units or more, or has some type of historical commercial use, you're going to have an environmental third-party due diligence that's going to be required by your bank, okay? So the important thing of that is that the bank's gonna stop you from buying a dirty property. The reason why it's not smart to buy a dirty property is because there's risks involved with it. The Department of Environmental Conservation in New York State can force you to do an involuntary cleanup of a property that is considered dirty. So that's the biggest risk. Also, banks on the back end do not want to take on environmental risks. So if you're purchasing a commercial property for cash, you're going to want to get environmental due diligence. Okay, done. This is done by a third-party company, and you get what's called a phase 1 environmental. This is basically going to be the history of the property. Okay, it's almost like a title report that's going to detail all the historical past uses and also the historical past uses of adjacent properties to yours. So if you're buying property for cash, yeah, you can buy the property, but the thing is that when you're going to refinance that property or sell it at some point in time in the future, a buyer or a bank is going to require a phase 1 environmental be done. If that phase 1 comes back with recommendations, it's going to prompt what's called a phase 2, which is much more expensive than a phase 1. A phase 2 is going to actually take indoor air quality sampling. They're going to do drilling to monitor groundwater environmental impacts and all that stuff. So definitely make sure that if you're buying a commercial property, that you're having some sort of environmental due diligence done. Now, one thing that happened to me, I bought a property that was seller financed, had 4 units up top and 2 commercial storefronts. I didn't get a phase 1 environmental at that time because I was stupid and inexperienced. And my plan was to purchase that property, renovate the apartments, release the commercial storefronts, and then refinance that so I get all my money back and also my rehab costs. But when I went to refinance, the bank wanted to have a phase 1, which we had done. It was a smaller property in a residential neighborhood, so I didn't think there was anything that was going to come back wrong. Well, there was a dry cleaner in one of the commercial units. Dry cleaners have a history of using really dirty chemicals which can impact environmental air quality and also produce groundwater contamination. Thankfully, after spending $7,000 on a phase 2, which I did not budget for, it came back clean. But that was by the grace of God that I was able to get through that deal, and lucky in the back end. So you definitely don't want to count on luck. So always get a phase 1 environmental before you're purchasing a property that is considered commercial. The second is appraisals. Appraisals are very different for commercial properties as it is for residential, small multifamily, or single family properties, 1 through 4 units, remember, okay? The appraisals will evaluate the value of the property like a business. They evaluate it based upon net operating income. That is income, which is your rent minus expenses. The reason why that's important is that if you have really low rents in your commercial property, even if it's apartments, that will negatively impact the appraised value on the property, which can influence your business plan and strategy. Now, with 1 through 4 family, the appraisers really don't care about what the property is rented at currently. What they care about is sales comparables. Those are properties that are in the subject property's neighborhood. They're similar to that property. So no matter how high the rents you get on 1 through 4 family, you're going to be hamstrung by sales comparables. Where that bit me in the butt one time is I bought 3 2-family properties right next door to each other. They were on 3 different tax parcels, and I evaluated it as a commercial appraisal. And that means I evaluated it based upon net operating income. Well, the surprise I got when I refinanced that property after I dumped a ton of money into it, I had an appraisal shortfall because the sales comps in that neighborhood were just lower. So make sure that you understand what type of appraisal is going to happen on a property. The reason why commercial is so scalable in terms of growing your net worth and growing your cash flow is because for the sole simple fact that if you can push the rents, you can increase the value of that property. If you can normalize or reduce expenses, you can push the value of that property. Not the same case with single through 4 family. Number 3 is leases on the commercial property. You want to make sure that you have leases that are going to help you on the back end when you are executing your business plan for the property. If you have really low leases, like let's say you're buying a vacant commercial property and you just want to get it leased up and put out really cheap rents in lieu of that to rent it up, then that can negatively influence your appraised value on the back end, referring to number 2. So you want to make sure you have really strong leases. What I do is that I typically will hold my commercial spaces vacant for longer to get a higher rental rate on them, because I want to get the biggest value on the back end when I go to refinance that property. This is utilizing the BRRRR method, the buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat strategy. So that's very important to this. Typically in residential multifamily, single through 4 family, typically you don't want to hold the unit vacant for more than a month, because to get that higher rent isn't really going to positively affect your valuation on the back end, not so much as commercial. So definitely make sure you're evaluating your leases during due diligence, making sure they're strong. If you have national tenants that are in there, appraisers like that. If you have those types of leases, also longer term leases, appraisers will assign a higher value to those as well. So definitely make sure that's part of your due diligence and financial analysis with evaluating commercial properties. The fourth that you need to know about buying commercial investment properties is financing. Financing is very different than it is for residential. With residential multifamily or single family, you can get long-term 30-year debt at a lower interest rate, and that's fixed for the entire 30-year term, okay? So that is not the case for smaller commercial properties, okay? Which is typically financed by community banks. The reason why that's important is that you'll typically get terms like this. You'll get a 20 or 25-year amortization that's got an interest rate that's fixed for 5 years, and then a balloon payment for the entire principal balance due in 10 years. The reason why community banks do this type of financing is managing their interest rate risk, okay? They can't carry a low interest rate for 30 years because they're not backed by government-sponsored enterprises like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So you want to make sure that you're accounting for that. You're going to have lower cash flow because you have a higher debt service associated with having a lower amortization, 20 to 25 years. And plus, you're going to want to consider interest rates may go up, projecting that in your projected pro forma and cash flow statement. And then also that you're going to have to refinance that property or sell it before 10 years when the term is up. So that's very important is the financing. And that's also when you're buying single through 4 family, you may want to consider purchasing those with a relationship lender like a community bank, because you can establish that track record and prove a concept of you as a real estate investor. So if you start doing larger deals, that you already have a relationship in place. So if you have a deal, this is the benefit with using community banks, that doesn't fit that sort of like cookie cutter box or anything like that. You have maybe tenants that are on month-to-month leases. You have shorter-term tenants. You have tenants that are below market rents. That community bank and your loan officer, when they appear in front of loan committee to pitch your deal to the loan committee of the bank to approve your deal, they could say, all right, we know this person. We have a relationship with them. We've done deals with them in the past. This is their business plan, and this is their pro forma and rent comparables to support this plan. If you don't have that relationship on the get-go, it's much harder to get that deal done. So definitely consider there's differences in financing, and make sure that you're having conversations with community banks in advance of doing that. Now, when you go to much larger deals, like let's say $2 million and up, you can benefit from going outside of community banks and going through more conduit lenders that are typically put together by commercial mortgage brokers. With that, you can get non-recourse debt, which means that if your business plan fails, your only liability is losing that property and not them going after your personal assets. Not the case with community banks. Community banks will always have a personal guarantee that's required. So definitely take that into consideration. I hope this has helped you, as it's helped me along the way. I learned a lot of hard lessons along the way, and I want to share this with you so that you don't make the same mistakes as I do. Have a great day. I'm out.